Hey y'all, it's me Tiffany and welcome back to my channel. So typically I don't do like an actual script for my videos. I do sometimes have an outline with points I want to hit, but most of them are like not even paragraphs to be honest with you. So unless they're a tag, I'm not really looking at too much unless it's like a quick glance, right? And also I wasn't planning on doing a review or thinking to make any type of content with either one of these. They're called Displacement. Both of them are. This one's a travel log though, and this is just Displacement. So I actually went to check out this Displacement. This is what I put on the website at my library because of everything that's going on. It's just easier to put them in on the website and pick them up and go. I'm trying not to, even though I am vaccinated and I have all the stuff, I'm trying not to be too much in people's spaces or get too exposed, that kind of thing. And this particular trip to the library messed up twice. I wanted a Diary of Anne Frank and I wanted this, and they gave me this and 50 Shades of Grey. This, I can understand how they mixed it up. They're both named Displacement. How they messed up 50 Shades of Grey and Anne Frank, I'm not sure, but I know things are really hectic right now. They got weird hours. I know they're not working a lot of people in the library, so I'm not going to hold it on them. But I think it's kind of funny. Like, that's a really big mix-up. So the reason I wanted to talk about these, because both, they were really good, and I thought it'd be interesting to talk about two graphic novels with the same name, and they both have something to do with World War II, and in a way kind of like flashbacks. So these are, both from American points of views, except for this Displacement is based off Japanese internment camps and how Japanese Americans were discriminated and taken from their homes, and just a lot of bullshit, to be honest. This one, they're actually going on a cruise, which I know that's not World War II, but the granddaughter who is accompanying the grandparents on the cruise is reading her grandfather's he has like a memoir of his time in World War II, and she reads it throughout this. And just like on this page, like you can see, like there's like little flashbacks, and she does do art when it goes back to that. And this one, she kind of has like a mental going back in time thing, like seeing her grandmother in the internment camps, and obviously like that's most of it, so there's art for that too. And I thought it was interesting, before I go deep into this, I thought it was interesting that the graphic novel that this got mixed up with still has to do with World War II, and in a way flashbacks. Yeah, she's reading a memoir versus actual flashbacks of her own thing. But what was also interesting too is her grandmother was in the internment camp, and then she's reading her grandfather's memoir, and that's mostly where the similarities end, because they are two different stories. Like, her grandfather had absolutely no prejudice used against him. He is seen as a war hero, and her grandmother was literally stripped from her home, separated from her family, and discriminated against because she was Japanese. So the similarities end like where I mentioned, but I just thought it was interesting. Like, they're both about grandparents and in a way flashbacks, both about World War II. They're both graphic novels, and they have like the same name. So I was like, and they're both good. Like, they're both good. Like, yeah, the art's really different, and one of them's a lot longer than the other, but they were both surprisingly good. And I just thought, wow, I want to share my experience with this, because it was so interesting, right? Because I didn't even think about reading this, but then when I saw on the back that it talked about a World War II diary, I was like, huh. So I did read this one first, because I went and put this one back on hold, and I checked it inside the library before I left, because a lot of times I just grab the books and go, right? And Yeah, this one's a lot shorter, and I think it would have been more interesting if. Okay, so I guess I talked about the synopsis of these two. I know this all over the place. There's absolutely no outline at all. I just finished this, threw some clothes on, and washed my face, to make this video. And I think this one would have done a lot better if it was longer. Apparently, she does other memoirs and stuff, but I haven't read anything by her. I didn't know this existed. And the artwork is very, very simple. Like, she doesn't really do background too much. There's a couple of spots, like this one, where she has like a background and a whole scene, but most of them like aren't like that. Like, the way the story is told is very like minimalistic, which I do think it works and it's interesting, but I would have loved to see more art because I think the art's actually like almost like a cartoonish in a newspaper type thing. And I like seeing that, I like seeing different styles of art. And this talks about like dementia, like her grandmother can't remember anything and her grandfather can, but he's still older and like he urinates on himself and he has mobility issues. And I think he does have some memory issues. He's just not as bad as his grandmother or her grandmother, my bad. And it was interesting talking about like he didn't want to hurt anybody. He didn't want to be in this war. And it seemed like I read other stuff too. I don't think, even though they have pride in being a World War II veteran, they don't want to hurt people, but they have to. They feel like it's their duty. They're being drafted, so they really have no choice. And all he wants to do is spend the life, like he met like her grandmother and he just wants to get back to her, get married and like leave all this behind. And I would love to see more like about the times in World War II because they randomly happened, but the way this sounded, it was a private memoir just for her and the other grandkids and the kids. So maybe this was all she could get permission to share, instead of the nitty gritty stuff, because I don't think it was like traditionally published. But this was so cute. Like, I hate that, you see like your grandparents getting older and, you start thinking, man, I hope like my body never gives up on me like that. And it's a scary thing, but the fact that she's willing to go up and beyond to help her grandparents, even though she's on a cruise in the Caribbean. And like, it's interesting too to see like her other relatives, like when she was talking about maybe we need to get them a different flight, maybe this and that. And like everybody just disregards old people, which honestly does happen. Like, people don't give a crap about older people and just push them off to the side because they got to do what they do now. Even other relatives were like, no, the flight with 1,000,000 layovers is cheaper, so we're just going to do that, even though it's really hard on the elderly grandparents. And it was just an overall interesting read, and I think most people would enjoy this. I do wish it was a little longer. It only takes span of within the cruise and then like a couple of days before and like her night back home. But I don't know if she got permission to like share more about the more about his memoir, and maybe that's something too personal he don't want to share. But I haven't read hardly anything that talks about how bad we treat the elderly people when they need things. We're just like, hurry on and go on, you're bothering me, blah blah blah, and people don't take time and patience. And it's sad because we're hopefully all going to be elderly, and we're all going to need help at some point if we make it to a beautiful old age. So I liked what it talked about with that. And so this one, I did read the second because of the issue. And it starts off with her and her mother going back to San Francisco and trying to find, her grandmother's old house before the internment camps. And it looked like, the street names and stuff have changed. I like the artwork. It's pretty simple too. It has more of a webtoon type style, in my opinion, than like the newspaper, but I think that's fine. Not everything has to be like super realistic and stuff. And honestly, with graphic novels, I do kind of like the more simplistic stuff. And I think it's interesting because it goes through talking about like the dorms they were in before they got sent to the camps in particular. It talks about like, because of where I'm at, people know the Japanese internment camps existed. But on the mainland, I knew a lot of people who did not know they were a thing, or very broadly. And it even talks about, like, well, not on this page, but it even talks about, they made a contract saying, hey, you can get out of these camps faster. Here you go. It talks about, like, if you, like, especially, like, the men, I think it was only men, if they were willing to join the U.S. Army, because at this point they weren't considered citizens anymore. They were considered, like, they weren't prisoners, but you know how the government does. And it basically talks about, are you willing to pledge your allegiance to the United States? And if you join the Army, you can get out of these camps, but you have to be willing to be deployed and fight for these people who took you and your family. A lot of families got separated. Some stayed together. Possibly got separated. And basically die for them, even though they took your home and everything, right? And then you didn't have to join the Army. You could stay there, but you were supposed to say, like, I pledge my allegiance to the United States regardless. And the people who didn't got separated. And it doesn't say, like, where they went. But I like that it mentioned that, and the flashbacks of her in the internment camps put her there next with her grandmother and some other people. One dude actually decided he wants to get approved to join the Army to get out because he feels like this is a way to prove that we're not bad. And the other people are like, no. And, they're talking about, like, some people signed the loyalty thing because they were scared, and some were like, no, you screwed me over. And I like the fact that it hit on those different mindsets because people aren't a monolith. Like, even within, like, a same ethnic group, they're going to have diverse opinions on things and how they feel about stuff and what they deem as important, or how they should see survival and how they can make a difference, everything, right? So I like that it hit, like, on all of that, and it did it in a simplistic way that makes it engaging to read, and it makes sense. Like, you didn't have to go into a lot of deep detail, but you understood that's the message that it was getting with those scenes. And I really enjoyed that, and I like the fact that at the end, she talks to her mother about this flashback memory sequence, and her mother had that too. And I'm not a psychiatrist or a doctor by any means, but I have heard of, like, this can happen sometimes with, like, generational trauma and stuff when you grow up, like, hearing about the trauma, or you learn about a family member's trauma, especially a systematic one, that not that you necessarily go back in time, because that's not possible, but you can have, like, memories or feelings or even sometimes just reactions to things because of survival. And I'm not going to go deep into that because I'm not a doctor or a psychiatrist or anything in that field, but I think it's interesting that it hits on that. And she is, like, biracial, and she never felt like, the main character is biracial, and she never felt like particularly Japanese, but she connected with her culture and learned a lot from it. And I just think it's interesting, and I definitely recommend you read this one too. This was my intended read, and I was just going to read this on my own because it looked interesting. I've been seeing it on Goodreads, and I accidentally got 2 great graphic novels that hit on 2 different things very effectively, and I appreciate that. So, guys, that is it. I'm sorry this is rambling all over the place. I hope you enjoyed it. If there's anything you'd like to see me read and talk about, or talk about in general, I'm cool with talking about other things too, like movies or anime. Let me know in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time. Bye!